Hey guys, good to see you again. Happy Friday. Last time we spoke, we met an individual named Neville Chamberlain. He is the Conservative Prime Minister of England in the 30s, known today as the Apostle of Appeasement. Now, he's got the Herculean task in September of 1938 to try to redirect or prevent Hitler's invasion of the Sudetenland. As you know, he made some progress, but Hitler actually chose a date, September 30th, for the planned invasion of this land in western Czechoslovakia. So a hastily planned meeting the day before the invasion, 9/29/38, was called at Munich, Germany. This is, of course, today known as the Munich Conference. The Munich Conference. England, France, Italy, and Germany meet to try to hash out and find some basis for negotiation or compromise at Munich. Now, Hitler, very sly. He's very sly. He's slippery, he's political, he's manipulative. He's able to leave Munich with what he wants, okay? And today we do know, we recognize the Munich Conference as being the high point, the pinnacle, the zenith of Western appeasement of Adolf Hitler and Nazism. They're going to give him the Sudetenland. And again, he's very slick. He tells them, this is it. This is my final territorial ambition. This is my last acquisition. If you give me the Sudetenland, which again was largely German-speaking with a strong Nazi Party influence, if I get that land, I will be complete and I am done. And again, Chamberlain and the West are like, well, hey, if we can avoid global conflict for one piece of land that's mostly German-speaking, let's do it. So all parties left that day feeling very good about what had transpired. Chamberlain goes back to London. He flies home that evening and he arrives at the tarmac at the airport, and there's a huge throng of people. There's a mass of humanity awaiting his return. It's like a ticker tape parade. It's a very celebratory mood for this returning hero, Neville Chamberlain. He's going to utter, today maybe slightly infamous, they were famous back then, but again, has there ever been a more sort of ironic phrase, and a phrase that didn't work out the way it was planned, than what he says next. He arrives back home in London, and he says, I believe, folks, that we have achieved peace for our time. Peace for our time. Never has there been a more misguided, incorrect statement in the course of European history. So for a while, things looked okay. Maybe his words were true, and he managed to subdue this monster, Adolf Hitler. However, March of 1939, so about 6 months later, things began to happen again in Eastern Europe that reveal the tyranny and the future of Nazi Germany in that part of the world. So for those of you who are Latin enthusiasts, beware the Ides of March. 3/15, or March 15th, 1939, the Nazis are going to invade the rest of Czechoslovakia. They arrive in the capital city of Prague, Prague. They arrive in Prague on the Ides of March, and again, this told the world the reality, the gravity of the situation, that this man is a monster, he is an imperialist, and we are in for a long road. Czechoslovakia, not German-speaking, no Nazi Party influence there, so now the reality was known by the world and they were quaking as a result. So, summer of 1939, Hitler begins to plot his next course. He's going to contact Poland, and actually in some ways Poland shares something with Czechoslovakia that makes them, both bitter rivals to Hitler. They really represent all that's wrong in the configuration of the land of Europe. Both countries were created by the Treaty of Versailles. So he hates Czechoslovakia and he hates Poland as well. He probably hates Poland a little bit more If you recall, when they formed the new Polish state, they carved a Polish corridor right through German land, creating two disconnected German territories. So Hitler calls Poland and he says, you know, you cut this pathway through our land, you separated our country, you took our land, you eviscerated our nation with that step. And he's bitter in classic Hitler phraseology and tone. He's bitter and he gets their attention. What he's asking for, though, is not domination. He's not saying, I'm going to invade you. He's playing politics a little bit. He's playing public relations. Hitler tells Poland, what I want, what we need as a German people, we want to build a railroad or a highway system through the Polish corridor to connect these two disconnected German territories. Please operate in good faith. We appreciate that. And of course, Poland responds that, hey, this is outrageous. There's no way we're going to do this. And really, Hitler knew that would be their response. He realized all along they would not abide by that request. His goal, though, was to have a pretext for a future invasion of Poland. Somehow it made it more passable that, hey, they turned down our good faith request for this bridge or this railway through your land, and it made somehow the invasion set for September of 1939 easier to stomach in terms of diplomacy for the world. So Hitler is going to target in his mind September 1939 for the invasion of Poland, and of course this does begin the conflict known as World War II. Now before we get there, what I want to do is talk a little bit about an agreement, a treaty, a pact that was signed a few weeks before the start of World War II. So August of 1939, a treaty was signed by two very awkward, curious, strange, odd bedfellows. The Nazis and the USSR are going to sign a treaty. Very strange. So Hitler had a long-standing disdain for communism. And where was the pillar of communism during this time period? In the USSR and their leader, Joseph Stalin. So what motivates these two individuals who are completely different ideological pillars or poles? What led to this arrangement, this agreement? What was the motivation? They each had their reasons. Let's look at Stalin first. Why does Stalin sign the Nazi-Soviet Pact? A couple of things. Number one, Stalin had his eyes on that land that Russia had lost at the Treaty of Versailles. It became the Cordon Sanitaire. Estonia, Lithuania, Latvia, the Ukraine. He wanted that land, and he got assurance from Hitler that Hitler would stop short of any future expansion into that land. Essentially, Hitler would recognize Stalin's supremacy and his domain over those lands in the Cordon Sanitaire. So that was the first thing. The next two were very personal. Stalin, one, did not respect England or France. You know, he found their appeasement weak, insipid, did not have respect for the policy, the foreign policy of the West. And then lastly, Stalin rather didn't appreciate not being invited to the Munich Conference and recognize all of the power players in Europe. So he held a grudge over that omission of Russia at Munich. How about Hitler? Why would Hitler sign a pact with Joseph Stalin? Again, very, very different ideologically, categorically different in every way. What is Hitler thinking? Well, a couple of things. Hitler was a great student of German history and a nationalist to boot. He had a great affection for Otto von Bismarck. Think back with me to, March or so, maybe February, guys. Remember Otto von Bismarck? What did he fear above all else? What kept him awake at night? Two-front war, two-front war, two-front war. So of course Hitler thinks, hey, if I can control, if I can subdue the USSR, they will not be in an alliance with the English or the France. His fear of two-front war also has a motivation in this case. In addition, why else would Hitler sign a pact with Stalin? Stalin promises Hitler, hey, when Germany begins their westward invasion into Poland in September, the USSR will also begin to invade and will supply military assistance from the east in the invasion of Poland. Did Hitler and did the Germans really need military assistance from Stalin? No, not really, but you never know. It couldn't be all bad. And lastly, maybe most importantly, is do you think that Hitler plans on stopping with the invasion of Poland? Of course not. The whole notion of Lebensraum, or living space, was to expand and take over Slavic land in the USSR. So any agreement between Stalin and Hitler through the eyes, through the lens of Hitler, would be only a temporary agreement. So that land would all be part of the German domain eventually anyway. So that's where we are, guys. So let's leave it right there for a moment. We understand now that the war is going to begin in September of '39. Let's go back somewhere else. Speaking of Hitler's allies, his greatest ally, with a very similar post-war reality in the late teens, early 20s, let's look a little bit at Italy. So Italy, which becomes really one of their chief allies during World War II. Let's talk for a few minutes here about the birth of fascism and all the hate that was spewing in Italy following World War I. Now again, against the backdrop of inflation, unemployment, the refusal of the Allies to grant Dalmatia at the PPC to Italy, and Orlando leaving in tears back in 1919. All this is going on, and there's also a great fear. Again, what was spreading? What was that pandemic that folks were concerned about? The rise of communism. So against this backdrop is going to rise a new political party known as the Fascist Party, the Fascists, F-A-S-C-I-S-T, F-A-S-C-I-S-T, the Fascists or the Fascist Party. They were largely based upon bitterness, animosity, anger at the West, meaning England and France, post-war, and also a fear of the sort of developing, bubbling subcurrent of communism European-wide during this time period. They took their symbol, or their name fascist or fascism, from the fasces. The fasces, if again you're a Latin historian or a Roman historian, the fasces was a Roman bundle of sticks that came to embody the strength, the authority of the Roman Empire. So the fascists are trying to connect or look back to days of prior greatness and glory. The leader, the founder of the Fascist Party, and really the Italian version of Adolf Hitler, was a man named Benito Mussolini. Benito Mussolini, and he goes by the nickname to his people, Il Duce. Il Duce meant leader in Italian. So a little, 5'4", ball of hate. His chest always puffed out. His chin was always up. Il Duce is the founder of this political party in the late teens. A bit of background on Mussolini. He served in World War I, like Hitler, however, didn't really serve with distinction, and he left before the war was over with to begin a political paper or magazine called The People of Italy. Again, heavily nationalistic, far right-wing, anti-communist People of Italy. However, kind of a funny story, his first job before the war, you'll never guess this, his first vocation prior to World War I, Benito Mussolini, all of his hate and his angst and his discontent and his rage, was a kindergarten teacher. Imagine your first day of school, you're 5 years old, and your teacher, your headmaster, is Benito Mussolini. Anyway, I digress. Let's get back into the content. So, post-war, he's going to form an organization or party, as I mentioned, called the Fascists. One similarity you can think of here in terms of connections to Nazism, both far right-wing. The Nazis had their brown shirts, or the SA, as you know. Now, the bullies in 1920s Italy were called the black shirts. The black shirts, again, were the heavies. They were the thugs, the fascist thugs that supported the rise of Mussolini and his political party. The black shirts also went by a nickname or a name called the squadristi. So the squadristi was their name for the black shirts. And the squadristi was spelled S-Q-U-A-D, like squad, then R-I-S-T-I, S-T-I. The squadristi, or the black shirts, and Mussolini are going to get their break in 1922, where because of the force of their politics and their anti-Versailles sort of rage and rant, they were able to gain an entry or an invitation by the King of Italy, Victor Emmanuel III. And Victor Emmanuel III says, Mussolini, we respect who you are and your power, your authority, your voice. We invite you to begin your own government. You can take over and become the leader of Italy. This culminates in October of 1922 with the March on Rome. The March on Rome came to signify the rise of Mussolini and the takeover by Mussolini and his squadristi. During the mid-20s, Mussolini and the squadristi, or the black shirts, they come to represent really all that was wrong. They were monstrous thugs in Italy, and they mastered this notion of one-party politics. People were being beaten down in the streets. Printing presses were destroyed. If you were a great thinker or a political dissident, you were being sent to an island far, far away in exile. One of the favorite tricks by the squadristi, if you were, I suppose, communist, or you were a rabble-rouser, or I don't know, you had a brain or your own thoughts, they would tie you down and pour a gallon of castor oil down your throat until you became immensely ill, violently ill. So they mastered one-party politics during this time period. By the way, folks, people by and large had a great affection for their El Duce during the mid-20s. And really, they left World War I in a very low place, didn't receive Dalmatia, fought horribly. The country itself was very wobbly economically, just like Germany. It was largely third world. They lacked technology, they lacked modern modes of transportation. They were very backwards in a way in the mid-20s. And this guy Mussolini came to represent all that was good about the future of Italy. He promised what was called a bold experiment. He got the average rank-and-file citizen behind him due to the promise of what he called a bold experiment. Modern technology, modern transportation, more of a first world progressive attitude. And also, this sounds like a minor thing, he promises people of Italy, I guarantee you, the trains will run on time. There was this pervasive problem always over the years with things being so slow, so delayed in Italy. No one ever get from point A to point B. Benito says the trains will run on time, and they applaud him for that. Why else did they like El Duce? El Duce had a fabulous personality outwardly. He projected a certain masculine strength, a certain intellectualism, a certain intensity that people kind of admired in Italy. He was not passive. He gave really powerful speeches and spoke with great passion and conviction, but again, seen as being a man's man, seen as being a great intellect, and the rumors spread like wildfire. People would say, did you know that El Duce never sleeps at night? He's not slept, say, for 27 months now in a row. He never sleeps. He doesn't need to sleep. They believe that he was so intellectual, had so much capacity and gray matter that he had memorized every last word to Divine Comedy by Dante. Every word could recite from mind, from heart, Dante's Divine Comedy. He loved speed. He loved new technology, new cars, new planes. You see El Duce racing around the streets of Rome in the newest car. There was something about him that gave Italians, maybe in the post-war years, the hope, the promise of a better future for all of Italy. 1929, a couple of things happened, guys. A couple of profound moments that affect the future of Italy and Mussolini. Number one, there's still one entity that's preventing complete control of Italy by Mussolini and the Fascist Party, the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church still has a lot of say, obviously, in Italy. So Mussolini is going to sign a treaty with the Pope known as the Lateran Treaty. So 1929, the Lateran Treaty, L-A-T-E-R-A-N. The Lateran Treaty, an agreement with the Catholic Church, the papacy, with Mussolini. What does the Pope get? The Pope gets the promise by Mussolini to recognize the Pope's authority and autonomy over the Vatican. Okay, so the Pope gets control over the Vatican City. His autonomy there is recognized by Mussolini. Also, Mussolini, although he was an atheist, promised to promote Catholic education and Catholicism as the official religion of the people of Italy. So he's an atheist. He says there's only one religion here in his country, and it's Catholicism, and there the Pope resides and controls over the Vatican. What does Mussolini get from the Pope? He gets the promise that the Pope would stay out of the way. So Mussolini gets the rest of Italy, and never a negative word would be uttered by the papacy against Mussolini and the Fascist Party. What's the second event of 29 that greatly impacts the future of Italy and Mussolini? The Great Depression is going to send Italy back into economic tailspin, back into the economic doldrums of the post-war years. The economy now is wobbly, it caves in, it's a very tenuous place economically post-Great Depression. It's a global economy. So by the mid-30s, Mussolini has decided, I must go somewhere else to get the resources that I crave to rebuild our economy. I need to go somewhere else. I need to resort to imperialism to bolster or bump up our economy once again. He's going to try to settle an old score. He goes to Africa, and he's thinking about the 1890s and the fact that, at the Battle of Adawa, the Italians lost a humiliating defeat to the Ethiopians. So he wants to right that old wrong from the 1890s, and he wants goodies. He needs fresh resources to bolster their economic foundation. So, 1936, Italy is going to invade Ethiopia in Eastern Africa. The emperor of Ethiopia is a man named Haile Selassie. I'll say it again. The Ethiopian emperor, a man named Haile Selassie. Selassie, S-E-L-A-S-S-I-E, S-E-L-A-S-S-I-E. Haile Selassie is going to go to the League of Nations and gives this beautiful, impassioned speech. And he tells the League of Nations, you were created in case a rogue, tyrannical country invades a small, powerless nation like Ethiopia. This is your time to shine right here, League of Nations. We need you to step in and offer military intervention against Mussolini. What does the League of Nations do? They do nothing. They give Mussolini a slap on the wrist, and that, my friends, is it. Okay? So Mussolini is going to occupy Ethiopia without a problem. And really, the refusal here by the League of Nations to muster any kind of reprimand or any kind of military response, it has a domino effect as well, because we're going to see shortly after what two leaders who had been previously a little bit awkward together and not copacetic, what two leaders now come together in a mutual recognition of their imperialist ambitions. 1936, we see the signing of what's called the Rome-Berlin Axis. The Rome-Berlin Axis, you guessed it, this is a new friendly alliance between Adolf Hitler in Germany and his new friend and ally Benito Mussolini of Italy. The Rome-Berlin Axis, dark clouds ahead, folks, dark clouds ahead. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.